Have you ever wondered what Amsterdam is all about? Don't just read about the culture that has accepted cannabis. Experience it firsthand with CS Travel's Sensible Amsterdam Tour with NORML. Travel to one of Europe's most beautiful cities this January for an educational and recreational visit to a city that regulates cannabis like alcohol. CS Travel has arranged an exclusive visit for reform-minded Americans that includes a private tour of some of Amsterdam's most renowned coffee shops, educational seminars with coffee shop proprietors, local law enforcement, members of the Cannabis Retailers Association, and NORML staff. Entertainment includes a special evening at the Boom Chicago Comedy Club, canal tours, visits to the city's many museums, including the world-famous Van Gogh Museum. Don't just wonder about Amsterdam, experience the beauty and freedom of this unique city firsthand with CS Travel and NORML's Sensible Amsterdam Tour. Pricing information is available online at coffeeshoptravel.com. That's coffeeshoptravel.com. Or call toll-free at 800-816-1846. That's 800-816-1846. Be a sensible American. Visit Amsterdam with CS Travel and NORML this January. Call 1-800-816-1846 right now to book your trip. More information is available at NORML.org. And distributed by the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws in Washington, D.C. This is your daily audio stash, the growing truth about cannabis. Welcome to the most popular audio podcast regarding marijuana in all of America and all the world, featuring interviews with scientists, politicians, doctors, prohibition policy activists, regular cannabis consumers, musicians, and NORML staff and NORML's board of directors, along with music and comedy no other podcast can offer. You can always find out more about the show at our website, NORMLAudiostash.com. We're ending marijuana prohibition with education, one listener at a time. Welcome back here to the Audio Stash today on Friday, December 14th. I'm your host, Chris Goldstein. Take a moment to join us today, especially here as we wind down the NORML Relegalize online fundraiser. Just visit norml.org/relegalize to help us end marijuana prohibition in America. Help us create a legally taxed and regulated market for marijuana in America that will drop the price of America's finely cultivated biggest cash crop in America immediately. So help us out right now. Help us relegalize marijuana. Go right on up to norml.org/relegalize, and we have links right up on our website today at normlaudiostash.com. A huge thank you. I really can't thank all of you enough who have already made that step and made that donation out there. We have received a great showing of support this week, and thank you again for all of the emails coming in thanking us for this podcast. We're going to keep it up. We're going to improve NORML's daily audio stash and our websites in 2008, and we're going to make it all happen with your support. Help us do it right now. Go to norml.org/relegalize. And again, we have links at normlaudiostash.com. Got a great show for you here today. We're going to speak with NORML's Executive Director, Alan St. Pierre, in a News Focus interview. And also today, we have a very special report from Radical Russ, Belleville, and Oregon NORML. Russ is on the board of Oregon NORML, and he's a talk radio host. You can hear him on XM Satellite Radio on one of the Air America channels. We have links to Russ at radicalruss.net get on our website today at normalaudiostash.com. Russ sends us this special piece today about the Oregon Medical Cannabis Awards. We'll hear an interview with Madeline Martinez, the director of Oregon NORML, as they get ready to host the Oregon Medical Cannabis Awards. That's taking place tomorrow, Saturday, December 15th. More information available at Oregon NORML's website. We have links to it at normalaudiostash.com. Also today, our regular Friday segment with Steve Bloom at celebstoner.com. We're going to talk about the celebrity stoner stories, and Steve's a huge baseball fan, so we're going to talk a bit about the baseball report today as well. Also have a huge block of music and comedy for you here on the Audio Stash. Some sort of Audio Stash classics like Ben Scales' Growing Marijuana in My Yard. We're going to play the live version we recorded at the Boston Freedom Rally this year. All that here today in NORML's Daily Audio Stash. And of course on Fridays you can pick up the separate NORML News weekly podcast. The stories in NORML News this week: House Judiciary Leader criticizes DEA's tactics on medical pot dispensaries, and passage of medical marijuana laws deprioritization measures coincides with significant long-term reductions in teen pot use. And finally, migraine may be related to underproduction of cannabinoids, study says. All that is available in the NORML News weekly text and audio release. You can find that right up at normal.org, and we have links at normalaudiostash.com. We have an absolutely massive audio stash for you today, guaranteed to last all weekend. The best stash, the free stash. NORML's Daily Audio Stash. Help us keep it going. Join us during our Relegalize fundraiser right now at normal.org/relegalize. Let's get to our news and our focus interview with Alan St. Pierre. Our news today from Washington, D.C. Passage of medical marijuana laws, deprioritization measures, coincides with significant long-term reductions in teen pot use. Self-reported rates of adolescent marijuana use are declining at the same time that numerous states and municipalities are removing criminal penalties on the use of pot by patients and minor offenders. NORML Executive Director Alan St. Pierre said today in response to a White House report touting a 25% reduction in teen cannabis use from 2001 to 2007. Here's NORML's Executive Director Alan St. Pierre.
The sharp decline in adolescent marijuana use cited by the White House actually began in 1997, 1 year after voters in California enacted legislation approving the legal use of marijuana by authorized patients, and this downward trend has continued since that time. During the same period, 12 states, that's more than 1/5 of the U.S. population, have enacted laws allowing for the authorized possession and cultivation of medical marijuana. In addition, numerous large municipalities such as Denver, Colorado, and Seattle, Washington, have enacted laws making the investigation and prosecution of minor marijuana offenders the city's lowest law enforcement priority.
That's NORML's Executive Director Alan St. Pierre. He continued.
In every case, these measures were opposed by law enforcement and the Drug Czar's office on the premise that they would greatly increase teen marijuana use. However, as this week's White House briefing shows, these legal changes have coincided with a significant long-term reduction in adolescent pot use. It is evident that the Drug Czar's fears were unfounded then, and they are unfounded now. The continued opposition by the White House and law enforcement personnel to the enactment of these compassionate and common-sense legal reforms has nothing to do with protecting public safety or addressing teen drug use. These groups' zealous opposition to marijuana law reform is more closely tied to their addiction to bloated budgets and maintaining control over the general public through the coercive tactics associated with criminal prohibition.
That was NORML's Executive Director, Alan St. Pierre. You can contact him for more information on this story at area code 202-483-5500 or contact Paul Armentano, NORML's Senior Policy Analyst, at paul@normal.org. Alan joins us today here on the Audio Stash to further discuss this story. Alan, welcome back to the program today.
Good day, Chris.
Great to speak with you today, Alan. Let's get into this news story. Basically, when we decriminalize marijuana, less teens actually use it. That's true in every instance of decriminalization policy.
In fact, this is been the case consistently, Chris, since 1982, when one of the first major reports that the government commissioned on the effects of decriminalizing marijuana in the 1970s. It was called the National Academy of Sciences study. And from that study forward, it is clear that when a state or a municipality decriminalizes or deprioritizes marijuana arrests, there is not an increase in teen use of marijuana or their perception that it's not harmful, which is important because law enforcement and the drug czar's opposition, strong, zealous, wild-eyed opposition to these reforms, has been largely predicated on what we now know is really a myth.
Now, in the same report, the authorities admitted alarming rates of teens abusing prescription drugs, and there's also this consistently higher number of teens drinking alcohol. Alan, are you seeing the decline in teen marijuana use also correlating with an uptick in kids drinking?
In fact, it is. In the 1990s, in the early 1990s, there were 4 or 5 researchers who published a couple of papers. Block is the name of one of the researchers, and the economic writer for the New York Times at the time, Paul Pascal, wrote a wonderful article that basically laid out the premise that if you reduce the access to marijuana by teens largely, you get a commensurate increase in binge drinking. So the question is, if we reduce marijuana smoking amongst youth, is it better? Is it more desirable that they then go on to binge drink? And I think most of us, most parents, are pretty quick to acknowledge from a pharmacological point of view, from a public health point of view, it probably is better in the lesser of evils that the kid had access to a little bit of marijuana than, say, binge drink and can fall under the influence of death, major organ failure, and, of course, unbelievably unwise, imprudent, in some cases violent behavior, mainly found amongst males who binge drink alcohol. So, again, in the world of lesser evils, having access to marijuana is arguably much more desirable than teens binge drinking.
Also, Alan, in states and municipalities that have decriminalized marijuana, do we see even less teen pot smoking in those decrim localities than the national average?
It tends to do so. One of the last major reports on this was in California, and for anybody familiar with this broadcast knows that California is the most tolerant, marijuana-friendly state, bar none in the United States, with hundreds of medical marijuana dispensaries selling marijuana in a retail-like environment to patients who have a doctor's recommendation. And so going back to 1995-96, when Prop 215 was first being proposed, the drug czar's office and its minions were just arguing so strongly that this would clearly increase children's drug use and access to marijuana and their perception that it's harmless. And the studies time and time again out of California demonstrate that despite the tolerance and the near quasi-legal access to marijuana in the state, that children's attitudes and their use of marijuana have generally gone down regarding not only using it, but their attitudes regarding whether it's an acceptable thing to do. So there's really no correlation between reforming marijuana laws and having children using marijuana or they're perceiving it to be less harmful.
Alan, when we discuss decriminalization and this impact of decreasing teen pot smoking in decrim areas, when prohibitionists and law enforcement speak in opposition to marijuana decriminalization, they, in almost every case, say that decrim will somehow send the wrong message to kids. But what is the message that our current policy is sending teenagers right now?
Oh, it's fairly sad from my point of view. One is you cannot be trusted. Two, we will forensically test you and try to monitor your behavior in a way that prior generations of human beings have never been exposed to, that we somehow have confused them regarding the forensic effects of drugs. We live in a society where alcohol is well tolerated and accepted. A good example, I was just watching the news last night, and some guy in Atlanta, drunk, had almost driven off the top of a parking garage, and only the thinnest of wires kept him from falling like 14 stories down. And yet there was no discussion in the media. There wasn't one negative intonation of him being drunk. It simply was sort of funny that he had almost driven off the top of a garage. And our society is terribly conflicted with the and our basic individual knowledge that there's a difference between using alcohol and abusing it. And unfortunately, that paradigm has been completely smashed under the war on some drugs model, such that we clearly acknowledge in our society that if you abuse alcohol, that there are plenty of civil and criminal penalties to both encourage you not to do that, and if you do it, to then rightly and appropriately punish the individual. But we don't have such a distinction for marijuana. All marijuana use, even if you're sick, dying, or sense threatened, according to the federal government, is abuse. This is a ridiculous paradigm to put forward to our children, and one that we know from surveys and from actual longitudinal data regarding drug use, children don't believe it. So, whether it's the DARE program or the Partnership for Drug-Free America, the kids who have watched now dozens to hundreds of these images put before them, and the Partnership for Drug-Free America tries to put 20 to 30 images a week before the demographic of 14 to 20-year-olds. And they watch that and they say, wait a minute, in my real world, looking around at my family, I can see that alcohol is much more problematic. I can see that tobacco is much more problematic. I can see that prescription drug abuse is much more problematic. And in many communities, things like heroin or methamphetamine, crack are really destructive as compared to cannabis. And so kids today, rightly, are very, very jaded about drugs and about attitudes. But if one is to believe, and I've always been incredibly dubious and a longtime critic of how the government gathers the information and surveys about who's using marijuana and under what circumstances. But if we're to take it at face value, this week's report is clear that there is a disconnect between changing the laws and kids wanting to use marijuana more, or that their attitudes change about it, thinking that it's more permissive. So, it is kind of an interesting spin, if you will, on what came out this week. But the data is pretty clear after 10 years that this is a trend that is well discernible.
Well, very, very interesting, Alan. It seems like the best message you can send to teens to get them to smoke less marijuana is to, in fact, decriminalize it. Also, Alan, we're getting to the end of our week-long Relegalize fundraiser this week. Folks, there are just a few days left today. Again, the last day on the podcast will be focusing on the Relegalize efforts. So make sure to make your donations right now at normal.org/relegalize. Alan, this year we're hearing a lot in news media about nonprofits gearing their fundraising efforts to an online audience. So NORML is really breaking ground this week in the path to the future here with web-based philanthropy through MySpace, Facebook, and the podcast.
Well, when organizations don't have lots of resources, they've got to be innovative. They've got to try to be at the vanguard. They've got to try to employ new technologies, and that's exactly what NORML does every day, whether it's this podcast or the web page or working with all the 130 chapters around the country. In the end, it's going to be interesting to see how much money was donated this particular week. We got a very good first couple of days start. I personally would be satisfied that if $5,000 was donated through individuals who had never donated to the organization before, and we can see this as we're seeing $5 and $10 donations come in each day. When we put them into our database, we see that this is the first time they've ever donated to NORML. And dovetailing into what you're talking about regarding this really big Facebook / Parade magazine promotion that starts this week, Steve Case, the founder of AOL, one of the smartest marketers in the United States, when he cashed out his billions of dollars at the top of the market in the late 1990s at AOL, he has started a number of philanthropic and organizations, and one of them is called America's Giving Challenge, and it's found at the casefoundation.org webpage, and starting yesterday at 3 o'clock on Facebook, that huge community is now activated, and NORML's involved in the process of trying to get as many people involved in donating as little as $5 per person, such that the Case Foundation will not only match these grants, but in many cases give $50,000 a day away to the nonprofit organization that raises the most amount of money and or attracts the most amount of people to their social network. So one of the things that we know is that marijuana and drug policy reform is incredibly popular on the Internet. Well, it should be. And that NORML's network is huge between our listserv, our very popular webpage, this podcast, Facebook with over 350,000 people on it, MySpace page with over 35,000 people. By the time we reach, say, Monday at around 4:20 in the afternoon, hopefully thousands of people around the country who want to see marijuana law reform, all they need to do is get involved in the network, donate as little as $5, and they could be steering tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars towards groups like NORML.
Also, Alan, along with all of the donations that have been flowing in, it's been an incredibly heavy week for email and notes from the public. So not just the donations are coming in, but a lot of love coming in to NORML from our online audience as well.
Much appreciated. It's one of those things that, you can't pay the rent with it, you can't pay the electrical bill, but the amount of goodwill that we get back from the general public who want to see the laws reform, and it often is just in the form of a note in their donation, and it is most heartening that they listen to the podcast, that they go to the webpage daily for their news and information, that whenever they get in trouble or they know anybody in trouble, they know they can go to NORML's legal section or refer them to a lawyer who cares about changing the laws and will represent them fairly. Or, as we can see from our stats, many people want to know about drug testing and the legalities of it, and there's no better source for that than NORML.
Well, Alan, many thanks for joining us here today. And in the final podcast day of the Re-Legalize campaign, everyone has just a few days left to make those donations. Show your support for NORML. Show the whole world that America wants legally taxed and regulated marijuana available to responsible adults. Make your donation right now at norml.org/relegalize. Alan, many thanks again for joining us today here on the Audio Stash. It's always great to have you here on the program.
My pleasure, and thank you, Chris, very much.
Thank you again, Alan. Alan St. Pierre is NORML's executive director. You can contact him about our news story today at director@norml.org. And everyone wants you to get involved with our Re-Legalize campaign. You can find links right up at normlaudiostash.com, and again, norml.org/relegalize. Stay tuned today. We've got our regular Friday segment with Steve Bloom's CelebStoner.com update. We've also got our special report from Oregon NORML coming up next. And we've got this special report in today from Radical Russ Belleville and Oregon NORML. Russ is on the board of Oregon NORML, and he's a talk radio personality. Links to Russ's website, radicalruss.net, right up on our website today at normlaudiostash.com. A big thanks to Russ and Madeline for sending us this report. And Russ will appear monthly here on NORML's Daily Audio Stash with a special report from Oregon NORML each month here. This is our first in the series, and it's a good one, talking about the Oregon Medical Cannabis Awards. They're taking place tomorrow on December 15th. More information on Oregon NORML's website.
I'm Radical Russ Belleville, and you're listening to the Oregon NORML Report on the NORML Daily Audio Stash, a monthly update on the news and events featuring the cannabis community of the Pacific Northwest.
Yes, restricted numbers, lightning, winds, and thunder, unity and power.
Tomorrow marks the culmination of 12 months of activism for the volunteers of the Oregon chapter of the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws. Saturday, December 15th, is the 6th annual Oregon Medical Cannabis Awards, recognizing the highest quality strains of medical marijuana grown in the state of Oregon. We sat down with the executive director of Oregon NORML, Madeline Martinez, at her home in Portland while she worked on last-minute arrangements for the event. In addition to the strain evaluation, the event also includes vendors, speakers, a hemp fashion show, a biodiesel vehicle conversion, a legal panel recognized by the Oregon State Bar, and a banquet recognizing the volunteers and organizations who have worked the hardest to protect Oregon's pioneering medical marijuana program. The founder of NORML, Keith Stropp, will also be appearing at the awards and the legal panel. For these efforts and others, Martinez was recognized this year by NORML with the Pauline Sabin Award for Outstanding Female Leadership in Marijuana Law Reform. Well, it's 2 days before the Oregon Medical Cannabis Awards, and I'm sitting at the home of Madeline Martinez, the Executive Director of Oregon NORML, and thanks for having us here.
You're so welcome. Thanks for being here.
We wanted to be on the NORML Daily Audio Stash here just to let people know what's going on up here in the great state of Oregon with our medical marijuana program and, with our special event. So I'll just give the floor to you. You just tell everybody. I'm sure the people on the East Coast can't even believe what we're doing out here.
Right. Well, this is our 6th Oregon Medical Cannabis Awards, which is a strain evaluation to find out which of the strains locally here in Oregon works most effectively for which symptoms or medical conditions.
So like a strain evaluation, you say, is that like a cannabis cup or something? Or?
Well, no, it's actually, they're registered judges, 28 registered judges that are registered with the Oregon Medical Marijuana Program, take 28 samples. We take those samples and we put them all together for them and get them out. They take them home and they evaluate them in the privacy of their own home to determine which works most effectively for their conditions.
Oh, so they're not testing and rating on the site or anything?
No.
So it's completely different than a cup in that respect?
Completely different. They do this over a 30-day period.
Okay.
We ask them to try one strain per day and just see how that works so we can get a really accurate evaluation of how they are working.
I think one of the things I found that makes this an interesting event is how much of the focus of it is on the medical aspects, but there's also those categories of appreciative categories of like the taste and the aroma and such, but really it seems like most of it's focusing on the medical side.
Right. That's exactly how it differs from the cannabis cup for us. What we're trying to find is how how effective they are medically. We're not just trying to see how high we can get or how much euphoria we're going to get from each strain, but more how much medical efficacy we're going to get from each strain.
Well, yeah, that's a lot of people don't realize. They think that marijuana is just marijuana, and they don't realize that one strain that might work well for migraines doesn't work so well for menstrual cramps or whatever the situation might be.
Exactly. Initially, what happened was in 2000 when we finally started. The program started to evolve, and we all sat and discussed. Well, I grew Northern Lights No. 5, and it took me 4 months to grow this, and it worked really well for my lower back pain, but did nothing for my wife's fibromyalgia. Right. And this is when we started to find out that, it's like someone who takes acetaminophen. It may work particularly well for your headache, but it doesn't work well for your inflammation. And so you take Advil for that. So it's just the same with, cannabis. It's a medicine, and it works better for some people for their symptom and better for other people for that symptom.
We've got, here in Oregon, it's a pretty tolerant state as far as marijuana goes, even from the legal side of it, just for non-medical use. It's decriminalized here. And so we've got a large community of growers out there that have really experimented with the genetics of these plants, and so getting some of this information, hard-coded into in a database and having this all down is a really great action. Now, how does the Oregon Medical Marijuana Program? How can you do this legally under the Oregon law? How does this work?
Well, what we do is we ask judges, Oregon Medical Marijuana Program registered patients to participate. And what they do is they pay us a fee, and we put this whole packet together for them where they receive, free of course of charge, samples of the marijuana in advance so that they can sample it. But we also put a banquet dinner together for them. We put an awards ceremony together for them, a day of vendors.
So with the Oregon medical marijuana law, these people can just exchange the medicine with each other.
Exactly.
There's no law against that.
You can exchange medicine with another patient there's no consideration involved. And that's why I say we give the samples to them free.
Yeah, I think that's the thing that when I meet people, that, especially when they're coming from other areas of the country that are a little less marijuana tolerant, they can't imagine this world we live in where it's given away.
Yes.
People have ounces and ounces and ounces of marijuana that they give away to people. It's the most beautiful thing.
We needed to figure out how we could make this work around our law, and it's really amazing because now we can have 24 ounces.
24 ounces.
24 ounces.
That's a pound and a half.
Medical marijuana per patient.
Wow.
And that's really exciting because when our program first started, we could only have 3 ounces at the grow site. And therefore, you could only exchange an ounce with another patient or card holder.
Right.
Well, now we can exchange 24, but when we originally started the law, we framed it around our law, which was the ounce. And so we only had 28 judges.
Oh, so you're only limiting the number of judges here because, what is it, you're giving a gram per sample, and that would be 28 grams. That would work out to a little less than an ounce. So really there's nothing limiting you at this point to going even bigger than what you're doing.
We could go even bigger. We kind of like keeping it, original to the original law, and we thought that just added a little bit more to it. And it actually limits it. It makes it more exclusive, which is a good thing because people rush to get in. We put our applications up online September 1st, and by, I would say, 5 days, we had a complete list of 28 patients that were going to do the evaluation.
So this event's at the Aimbridge Event Center. It's a major event center in Portland, Oregon, by the convention center there. So you've got the event center for the whole day, vendors and speakers and booths and nonprofits and movies all day going on there. I also understand there's a hemp fashion show of some sort.
There is a hemp fashion show. We've got a great hemp fashion show committee that's pulled together. I think we have 30 different models. We've got quite a few different outfits that are going to come out there. We even have a grand finale that's going to be silk and hemp wedding gowns.
Wedding gowns out of hemp. That's wonderful. We want more hemp clothing, and maybe we can get industrial hemp someday in this country and grow that and have more hemp clothing out there. I think one of the other things, while it is a medical event, and we focus a lot on the medical marijuana aspects, we don't shy away from the hemp aspects or the people from Enviofuel. Tell us a little bit about those folks.
Enviofuel is a company that is in Corvallis, Oregon, that actually they retrofit vehicles to burn vegetable fuel, used vegetable oil that they pick up from like French fries or
French fry oil,
fried chicken, and they say that when the engine runs, it actually smells like French fries, which I think is fabulous.
And of course, this would be the perfect oil to run in. That would be hemp seed oil.
Yes.
Once we get hemp re-legalized, we could use hemp seed oil and grow our way out of this oil crisis. So the event does raise awareness of all aspects of the marijuana plant beyond just the medical. But I guess the big culmination would be the awards that you have at the end. Other than just the strain awards that you have, you give awards out for public service. Tell us about the winners this year.
Well, this year we are honoring D. Paul Stanford, who's winning the Oregon NORML Freedom Fighter of the Year Award. Paul has the THC Clinic. He's the founder of the THC Clinic, and he has gone to bat for patients this year by defending our rights. The DEA came in and tried to subpoena 17 patients' medical charge from the THC clinic, and Paul Stanford stood up to the DEA and said, no, you will not, and he got the ACLU involved, and the ACLU came to bat for us, and the subpoenas were quashed.
Yes, that was a new tactic in the DEA's war against the medical marijuana states. The idea that they could, if they intimidated the patients and intimidated the program through these subpoenas, that would cause a backlash, and it turned out to work against the DEA in this instance. We also have awards for the ACLU.
Yes, the ACLU are going to be winning the Dr. Rick Bayer Award, and we give this award. Dr. Bayer is actually the father of the OMA. We consider him the father because he was the chief petitioner for it. And we give these awards out every year to someone who has shown courage under fire while defending patients' rights. And the ACLU of Oregon, as well as the ACLU of Washington State, are winning these awards this year.
Yeah, there's a lot of legal battles that are happening. California, of course, has been at the forefront of a lot of the raids, the legal battles that happen in medical marijuana, but it's starting to happen in Oregon a little bit too because of the success of the program. We've got the Kevin Mannix initiative coming up where they're trying to repeal medical marijuana, and so there's plenty of activism necessary up here in the Great Beaver State here in Oregon. So anybody who's listening to the podcast who'd like to get interested or involved with Oregon NORML, you can always reach us at ornorml.org or call our phone number, which is 503-239-6110. And before we wrap up the interview, this is the 6th year of the OMCA. So has this always been a smooth ride here, or have you ever had some problems with law enforcement, perhaps, in these events, or they pretty much leave you alone?
Well, actually, we had our own involvement with the DEA. In 2003, the DEA decided that they were going to close down the Oregon Medical Cannabis Awards the year we were holding it at the DoubleTree Hotel here in Portland. And they came in and they gave the DoubleTree warning that they would take their property from them if they allowed us to have our event. Again, the ACLU rode up and they were our heroes, and fought for us. We told the DoubleTree that Oregon NORML would sue them. And so it would be a debate whether the DEA would get the property or whether we would get the property. Well, that didn't go over too well with DoubleTree, but we won. The ACLU told the DEA to jump back over the line and leave us alone. Freedom of speech and all. We had our event.
Right,
and so there were officers.
There's no medicine. There's no medicine being sold or bought or anything, or any sample evaluations happening at the event. They really didn't have a leg to stand on.
Exactly.
It's completely a free speech issue. Well, we've been talking with Madeline Martinez, the Executive Director of Oregon NORML, and the Oregon Medical Cannabis Awards are happening tomorrow, Saturday, December 15th, at the Ambridge Events Center in Portland, Oregon. Check the website at ornorml.org/OMCA. I'm Radical Russ Belville with the Oregon NORML Report for the NORML Daily Audio Stash.
That's the first in our series of monthly reports coming in from Radical Russ Belville and Oregon NORML. We're going to check in on all the happenings out there, and next week we'll check in with Oregon NORML again to find out how those Oregon Medical Cannabis Awards went. Great stuff up there in Oregon. Madeline is really a personal hero of mine, and Russ, really an upcoming talk radio personality out there. You can catch him on XM Satellite Radio. We have links to his website on our website today at normalaudiostash.com.
You're listening to NORML's Daily Audio Stash.
And now it's time for our regular Friday CelebStoner.com update.
I want to be famous. I want to wear minks and satins and pearls.
Steve Bloom has his finger on the pulse of celebrity stoners around the planet. He posts it all and marijuana news up at CelebStoner.com. We have links to it on our website today. Steve, welcome back here to the Audio Stash today.
Hey, Chris, how are you?
Doing very well here today. Been a wonderful fundraising week here during the Relegalize campaign. A lot to talk about today at CelebStoner.com, Steve. We're going to get into the baseball stuff here in a moment, but you have this post with photos showing Woody Harrelson enjoying some marijuana while hanging out with Owen Wilson. So where'd these photos come from?
Oh, well, they're in Miami. I mean, Woody and Owen Wilson have been on kind of a world tour lately. Going back to, when I was in Maui and they were in Maui, they were at the Willie Nelson concert and they were spending some time out there because Woody has a house out there. And Woody and Owen are best friends, especially ever since, Owen had his attempted suicide. Woody's really come to his rescue as best as possible to help him out. And, Woody lives a pretty clean life. Besides smoking marijuana, he's a raw foods guy, he's a yoga guy, and I think he's, imploring, Owen, to clean up his life a little bit and just hang out. And so they've been touring around. They went to Peru last week, and they were at Machu Picchu, and they got into a little trouble with the media down there because they were kind of harassed by photographers, and apparently there were charges, against them that were dropped, and they had kind of grabbed some photographer and kept them in a room for a while to kind of calm them down, so they stopped shooting. It got a little crazy down there, and then they went to Miami, and so the latest round of photos have come from Miami, and the photo you're referring to, the little series of photos, they're sitting on, Woody, Owen, and two women, unidentified women, are sitting on a, like a futon type mattress. I'm not sure where. It looks like they might be at the hotel area where they're staying, and they're just kind of relaxing, somewhere. And they're sitting around, and the Us Weekly, made a big deal out of the Owen Wilson part of the video clips and photos, because Owen is kind of like he's kissing one of the women, and so they're saying, well, this is how you do it. You kind of come on to women in a certain way. Here's Owen Wilson's method, But, in the background, Woody is not paying attention to Owen frolicking with this woman, kind of playing around with a little baggie. And you have to look pretty close, and you don't really see what's in the baggie, but it seems kind of clear. And then in the slideshow that Us Weekly has, it looks like Woody's puffing on a pipe. So it's a little unclear. You have to, look at it a couple of times, but a lot of the news media have kind of focused in on this and kind of zeroed in on the bag and said, there's, Woody's bag. Big deal, Woody Harrelson smokes pot, that's not some revelation. But, when you see the photos, it makes it a little more interesting. But it's just kind of fun to see how these guys are palling around, who knows? I guess they'll go out to California next and kind of complete their tour, but, they're having a good time.
Steve, you also have an article up about a chain of food shops called Chiba Hut. They don't sell any marijuana, but everything in the shop is marijuana themed, and they're getting pretty popular.
Well, Chiba Hut was fairly new to me until I discovered them online a few months ago. I saw a press release that they had circulated just to get some, attention, and I immediately, I went to their website and I looked at it. Chiba Hut is a chain of sub shops, sandwich shops, and they basically call it the toasted sub. So, and they play off all these marijuana sort of references and double entendres. So all their sandwiches are named Kush, AK-47, Afghani, Chronic, the kind. It's funny. They even have a swag sandwich, which is a bologna sandwich, or they kind of joke on the menu. And it's a really fun little menu, and you kind of have to do a little double take, is this for real? And it seems like, well, maybe this is an Amsterdam type of thing. It can't be in the U.S. Well, yes, it is. It's in the U.S., and they may, use the terminology, but obviously they're not selling marijuana or they're not, selling any type of, intoxicating products at the stores. I mean, they're just strictly, sandwiches. And they're based in 6 locations, Boulder and Fort Collins. Fort Collins is kind of the home of the company in Colorado. And then in Arizona, they have shops in Tucson, Tempe, and Mesa, and they're opening up a new one in Flagstaff, and they're planning to do some expansion in Oregon, Nevada, New Mexico, and Texas over the next few years. So I contacted them and asked if they'd like to get involved with Celeb Stoner, and to my pleasant surprise, they took an interest in the site, and we've started a campaign. As I understand it, the company was founded in 1998 by a guy named Scott Jennings, who was influenced by the Cheech and Chong movie Nice Dreams, and he kind of liked the idea of selling kind of goodies out of a ice cream truck, had marijuana flavors to it. So, he took that concept and ran with it, and it's a 10-year-old company, but it's, very slowly, I think, just starting to, pick up some speed, and, so people really know it exists out there. Obviously, it's not all over the country, so you have to be only, in those 2 states to find it, and, they go for the college crowd, so they're in Boulder, and, they're looking to expand to probably places like Eugene and Taos and wherever else they're going to be. So it's just a start. But I have not tried their food. Some of their sandwiches look pretty good. I mean, pretty standard stuff. Meat sandwiches, more vegetarian style sandwiches. They have a white widow. That's a chicken breast with bacon, shrooms, Parmesan, provolone, and like a ranch dressing to make it white. I mean, some of the things, sort of make some sort of sense in terms of the names for the sandwiches and how it's connected, or they just use the name. Trainwreck is like a kind of a marinara, with cheese and Greek dressing and stuff like that, and they have a skunk, they have a Humboldt, which is guac and sprouts. That's kind of the veggie sandwich. And they have on the dessert menu, they have hemp brownies. They have something called Sticky Icky, which is basically a PB&J. They have goo balls, but again, they're not the type of goo balls you're going to get outside a widespread panic show, but everything's clean, obviously they're not selling anything illegal. And so I recommend, people to go out and try, the food at these stores, get back to us and let us know what they think. We're going to start a promotional campaign as well where we're going to give away some, coupons for sandwiches and stuff like that to get people a little more familiar with the shop. But it's very cool. It's, it's a unique place, and I look forward to visiting when I'm out in Colorado and Arizona soon.
Very interesting stuff there, just again showing how prevalent marijuana culture is in American society overall. Okay, Steve, now we're going to dive into this Mitchell report on steroids and performance-enhancing drugs in baseball. I know you're a huge baseball fan and attend many games in New York City each season. Steve, were you surprised by this report? I mean, some of it seems like old news.
Well, I'm not really surprised, but, I think what people were looking forward to with this report more than anything was to see what names were going to come out. And, pretty much up until now, it's all been about Barry Bonds and maybe a few other players, Jason Giambi, Gary Sheffield, and some of the older players who are no longer in the league, Rafael Palmeiro, and people like that who have been, associated with steroids or human growth hormone, HGH. I'm sorry. And so those names have been out there for a while. Jose Canseco, all those types of people who are admitted users. Jose Canseco wrote the book Juiced and, and pointed a lot of fingers at certain players. But it's really been unclear who are the guys out there who've been using. And, in following this over the last couple of days since the report was released, a lot of the reporters seem to think that, some players, got away with it in terms of not getting fingered in the report while others, got pointed out, because they had two main sources, and both of the sources came within the clubhouses of the Yankees and the Mets. One guy who was an assistant trainer for the Mets a few years ago actually got busted because he turned more or less and informed, to George Mitchell, who, ran this commission and published this report, the former senator, and, he basically used him as a major source to find out who this guy was selling to, because that's why he was busted. They found that he was actually selling steroids and HGH to players. And then there was a guy in the Yankees as well, a trainer in the Yankees, who also was implicated and also turned and, told a lot. So a lot of the names that came out on this list are former or current Yankees and Mets. They didn't, have guys inside every clubhouse, but they have these two guys. The biggest name on the list is Roger Clemens. He's, one of the greatest, pitchers in the history of baseball, just as Barry Bonds is one of the greatest hitters in the history of baseball. And, he's achieved, pretty much, on the same level of what Bonds has achieved. But everybody's pointed at Bonds all along. Bonds is the bad guy as he kind of made his run, to have the most home runs ever hit, and he surpassed, Hank Aaron and Babe Ruth in the last couple of years. And there was so much attention placed on Bonds, and now Bonds is under, indictment for perjury, saying that he never used steroids, and that's a whole other case. But that's where all the news has been over the last couple of years. And then Jason Giambi had admitted use, and apparently Giambi was the only player who did an interview with Mitchell. None of the players would talk to Mitchell. The Players Association completely clamped down, so we're not talking, so Mitchell didn't have any players. Now they're wondering, what did Giambi say, and who did he perhaps finger. So, there's Clemens, Andy Pettitte, teammate of Clemens with the Yankees. Clemens, I think, is maybe not technically a Yankee now because his contract only was through the end of last season. Andy Pettitte, and Roger Clemens both play for the Yankees, but Pettitte re-signed recently, and Clemens, has not re-signed, so it's not really clear. You could kind of say he's a former Yankee, but, so those two guys are two of the biggest names. Miguel Tejada, a shortstop who now plays for the Astros, who was just traded last week by the Orioles. He's a former MVP. Paul LaDuca, who's played, for many years and just was signed with the Washington Nationals after playing with the Mets for 2 years. And Eric Gagne, who was a big star, reliever for the Dodgers for several years before he kind of went, suffered some injuries and just was traded to the Red Sox last year. Those are kind of the biggest names on this list. But I mean, there's 80 names on the list, and you have to go through the 300-plus pages and read all the details of each guy and what they were charged with and what they did. In the case of Clemens, he used both steroids and human growth hormone. In the case of Pettit, he apparently just used human growth hormone. Now, a lot of players use human growth hormone to come back from injuries. That's kind of partially the main reason why a lot of players use it. So, it's not to bulk up so much as just to sort of like, be able to recuperate faster. But either way, I mean, they're both banned. And now steroids were banned in 2003. Most of these charges for what players have done is before 2003. They test for steroids. Now, in 2005, they banned HGH, but there's a big issue over HGH testing. There's no urine test for HGH because it comes out in the urine very quickly. The only way to test for it is a blood test, and the baseball does not test for HGH at this point, and maybe will at some point, but the Players Association has really, stood in the way of that because, blood testing is particularly invasive. So, this is ongoing. This is not going to change. I mean, players are going to continue to do this. Baseball is trying to kind of clean up its act, without having to have the government, weigh over it and do, a big, special investigation. Baseball decided to do it itself. So now they've let it out of the bag. Okay, we know we've had a problem here. We've ignored it for years. And honestly, when you say a problem, I mean, yes and no. I mean, I kind of have mixed feelings on whether this is even a problem. I don't necessarily think it's such a bad thing that the players, choose to, to so-called juice up. I mean, it does make it an uneven playing field, but but there's the positives of that and there are the negatives of that. You can juice up and extend your career and get bigger and get stronger. You can also harm yourself by taking too much of it, and you could end your career. Ken Caminiti, one of the players who was on this list, died, and he died basically from steroid use. So Lyle Alzado, the football player several years ago, died from the use of steroids. So you can take it way too far. I think all the teams knew this was coming. They're not dumb. They know the players where there's been kind of like, the arrow's been pointing at some of these players for years. Tejada, the arrow's been pointing at. There's been a lot of suggestions about some of these players. So that's where a lot of this stuff is not new. I think a lot of people thought, how has a guy like, Clemens stayed around baseball to the age of 45, just like Bonds, staying around to the age of 43. This is unheard of in the history of baseball. These guys last so long, and not only do they last that long, they're getting better as they get older. This is going to be talked about all winter long until baseball begins in the spring among sports fans. And but a lot of it is around the Yankees and the Mets. That's what they got. They got two moles inside, the clubhouses of both of those teams, and they, exposed a lot of names. Primarily, I think there's about 30 names attached to the Yankees and the Mets, and the other 50 names are from the rest of the league.
Righto, Steve. Well, folks can read more about all of this right up at celebstoner.com. Check out those photos up there in that story from the Middle East as well, and Steve's take on the baseball report. All of it's available at celebstoner.com. Steve, thank you again for joining us here this week.
Hey, thanks for having me, Chris.
Many thanks again, Steve. Steve Bloom has his finger on the pulse of celebrity stoners around the planet. He posts it all in Marijuana News right up at celebstoner.com, and Steve joins us each Friday right here on the Audio Stash. Stay tuned. Big block of music and comedy coming up for you next.
Hi, I'm Rick Steves, and you're enjoying NORML's Daily Audio Stash. Please take a moment right now to support this organization by donating online.
Folks, Fridays have been a really interesting day for us here on NORML's Daily Audio Stash. We run a lot of artist showcases and music showcases here on Fridays. Some of the folks who've been here with us on Fridays include Sendog from Cypress Hill, the Cottonmouth Kings, of course, Ominous Words rapper out there in California, Amy Nelson and Kathy Guthrie from the group Folk Uke, Paula Nelson, Willie Nelson's daughter. She has her own Paula Nelson band out there. Soulja, Soldiers of Jah Army. That was a great interview and an artist we've had here on Fridays. And we've just generally had a great time here on the Friday podcast. Got a great mix of this Friday content for you today. We're going to start things off with one of my favorite songs ever. A guy named Ben Scales. He's an attorney out of North Carolina, And he wrote this song a few years ago. It's become iconic. Ben gets flown around the country just to perform this one song at so many events out there. And he was up at the Boston Freedom Rally in September of this year, performing this song on stage to a crowd of about 15,000 there at the Boston Common. Here is Ben Scales with Growing Marijuana in My Yard.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thanks to all these mass can people, these volunteers who worked so hard to put this thing on. It's wonderful. I'll tell you a little story. I was driving down the interstate, minding my own business, not doing anything I could think of to draw attention to myself, except for the fact that I was driving down the median. You see, I couldn't pick a lane that day. It seemed like a meaningless choice. I couldn't decide between south and north, Bush or Gore, Bush or Kerry. Are you with us or are you a fairy? Rudy or Hillary? You gotta be kidding me. Kilometers or miles, window or aisle, paper or plastic sounds fantastic. Coke or a Pepsi? I'm so glad you asked me. A dog or a cat? You want fries with that? Just then the cops showed up, eager to interrogate me on the finer points of my driving skills. Hey boy, where do you think you're going? I was feeling a little playful, so I said, I'm going to Margaritaville. Yeah, I'm going to find me a brown-eyed girl. I'm going to fly like a free bird right up the stairway to heaven to my sweet home, Alabama. Going to check into the Hotel California. Going to take it easy. No more life in the fast lane. I can't get no satisfaction, but like a rolling stone, I'll be taking care of business, doing the wild thing in the wild world with the candy man and the piano man and the rocket man. Just want to hold your hand. Click. Could hear the handcuffs click, click, clicking tighter around my wrists. Bam! Could feel the cold steel trunk lid of the police cruiser pressing deeper into my cheek. Hey, Sarge, said the officer who was rifling through my car. Look what we found in his ashtray. What is it, Junior? Well, it looks to be a seed. A seed? Boy, what are you doing with a seed? You don't look like a farmer to me. Well, I feel like I'd played with this guy long enough, so I said, you're right, officer. I'm not a farmer. I'm a gardener. There's but one reason that I have that seed, and I'm not at all ashamed to tell you why it is. It's because I'm growing marijuana in my yard. Growing marijuana in my yard. I got a little pot spread out all over the lot, 'cause I'm growing marijuana in my yard. 'Cause I got the seed from Mexico. I stuck it in some dirt and let it grow. I put it in my garden with my peppers and my peas, and I get all the smoke I need for free. 'Cause I'm growing marijuana in my yard. I'm growing marijuana in my yard. We keep it where no one can see, so let's keep this between you and me. But I'm growing marijuana in my yard. Yes, I'm growing marijuana in my yard. But I can't tell my boss or I'll get fired. I don't grow much, just what I use. I work all day, and when I'm through, I smoke some marijuana from my yard. Take it, Ben. Policeman wants to talk to me. He says, how you gonna smoke up all that weed? He says, money's what you're in it for. Don't you know we're in a war? Now I'm gonna haul your ass downtown with me. And I said, hey man, what is it to you? How do I infringe on what you do? I beg your pardon if you were offended by my garden, but I just can't grow Prozac in my yard. So I grow my own medicine in my yard. I give some to my neighbor for his heart. I share it with my grandma, who keeps it from her son, 'cause we all know that stuff's against the law. Well, now there's nothing growing in my yard, 'cause the cops took all my land, both my cars. Now I have to buy my pot from a teenager in a parking lot who's growing marijuana in his yard. Oh, anyone can grow it in their yard. Hey, I can show you how, it ain't hard. Never mind the president, let's overgrow the government. And I'll grow marijuana in our yard. Let's grow some marijuana in our yard. Thank you for having the courage to be free.
That was Ben Scales up at the Boston Freedom Rally with Growing Marijuana in My Yard. Really the iconic song out there of this movement. Ben is a generous and wonderful individual as well, and he's a member of the NORML Legal Committee. He's helping us out on another project we're going to announce in the spring here from NORML's Daily Audio Stash. Ben's just a great guy, and you can download a lot of content from the Boston Freedom Rally right here on the NORML Events podcast. This is what we're all about here on NORML's Daily Audio Stash and NORML Podcasting. We bring you to the events, well, you might not get a chance to attend around the country, like Seattle's HempFest, the Boston Freedom Rally, the NORML Legal Seminars in Aspen and Key West, Florida, and of course, the NORML Conference and other events out there. Hey, if you appreciate this programming, take a moment right now to join us here at NORML. Show your support for the podcasts we offer for you. Go on up to norml.org/relegalize or right up at our website at normlaudiostash.com. Take a moment right now to make at least a $5 donation. Folks, all of these podcasts are free. A lot of organizations do not give away their podcasts or their content. They charge you for some of this stuff. They make you buy it in DVDs or audio cassettes or make you pay for the podcasts out there. We serve it all to you for free, so it's time to show some love back and show your support for NORML's podcasting today. Head on up to norml.org/relegalize or normlaudiostash.com. Show your support right now.
You're listening to NORML's Daily Audio Stash.
Let's get to some comedy. You know, we interviewed Lee Allen, who produced the Pot's Greatest Hits album, DVD and CD combo. We also got a chance to interview Doug Benson here on the podcast. Doug, of course, the star of the Marijuana Logs. You can catch him on Best Week Ever. You can find him on VH1, Last Comic Standing, and he's just all around the country, all around the world, really, making a lot of people laugh out there. And Doug and Lee really were great interviews here on the program. As involved with comedy as they are, they're very serious about legalization. So we're going to play some Pot's Greatest Hits comedy for you here right now. We have links to the album on our website at normlaudiostash.com. And again, if Lee and Doug are out there, if Doug Benson and Lee Allen are out there promoting NORML, promoting involvement, promoting legalization, well, you can get involved too. For as little as $5, you can help us bring a taxed and regulated legal marijuana market to America. Really, folks, we can make this happen together. Just go on up to norml.org/relegalize or normlaudiostash.com. Make your donation as you're laughing along with this next clip.
Has anyone listening to this ever been on a chain gang? Show of hands. There's 1, 2. Well, this next guy has. Here's Ron Schock at the Comedy Caravan in Louisville, Kentucky, telling a great American story.
I've been an advocate of it. I'm one of these radical Americans that thinks that the best thing our country could do is to legalize marijuana and tax it. Like, legalize it and tax it. Legalize it and tax it. Legalize it and tax it. It's our largest cash crop. We need the fucking money, okay? You know, you can't ever get rid of marijuana, since we're on the subject. You know, you can't ever get rid of marijuana. You can't get rid of it. You know why? It's a weed. Here, let me repeat that. It's a weed. That shit grows everywhere, okay? Do you know it'll grow as far north as Alaska on the edge of the Arctic Circle, turn right around and grow in Hawaii? And oh, bless you if you get hold of some of that. Oh, bless you, brother. Bless you, brother. There is a God, and he plays favorites. You know, I've debated people on radio and television, you know, or tried to get some of them to debate me. Some of them just won't do it, you know, because they have no argument for having marijuana, you know, not drug, marijuana legal in this country. I said, why is it illegal? They go, well, it's a drug. And you're an idiot. It's a drug. Well, what an argument that is. Okay, marijuana, THC, is a drug. So is aspirin. aspirin. Last year, 1,000 Americans died of aspirin overdoses. Nicotine is a drug. This drug tastes good like a drug should. They'll even put menthol in it for me, so in case I do get throat and lung cancer, I'll still have a nice, pleasant taste in my mouth, because my drug company cares about me, Bubba. And this drug is not only your state's largest crop, but it is our country's third largest export. And when we send it to third world countries, we don't put a warning on it. You know why? Fuck them. That's how we do business. We fuck them. This drug kills 250,000 of us every year, according to the American Heart Association. And alcohol's a drug. You don't think we have propaganda in this country? Every day you hear the term drugs and alcohol. Drugs and alcohol. Drugs and alcohol. Well, alcohol is a drug, so it can't be drugs and alcohol. That'd be like dogs and Rottweilers. It's a fucking drug. It's a drug. Let's call the truth the truth. It's a drug. Put the word drug in a beer commercial. Budweiser says, for all you do, this drug is for you. Well, thanks, pusher man. Pusher man. Well, alcohol, the drug, kills 100,000 of us every year. So aspirin kills 1,000, nicotine kills 250,000, alcohol kills 100,000, and marijuana never killed anybody anywhere at any time. But why let logics get in the way? I've said this to 500,000 people. None of you have ever known a belligerent stoner, and all of you know a belligerent drunk. Isn't that right? You know that guy. 3 drinks and he can whip Mike Tyson. You know that guy. I'll kick your goddamn ass. I'll kick you goddamn, me and Jack Daniels kick your goddamn ass. Marijuana smoker go, oh, wow. You probably could. We've settled that. I'm going to go get something to eat.
Was from the Pot's Greatest Hits DVD-CD combo. Lee Allen, the producer of that, has been right here on NORML's Daily Audio Stash, along with Doug Benson, the star of the Marijuana Logs, and a comic known the world over. They are out there promoting legalization. You should be too. And here's how. You can head on up to norml.org/relegalize. Head on up to our website at normalaudiostash.com. Make your donation right now. We have brought you all of the voices here on NORML's Daily Audio Stash. All of the voices from entertainment, from politics, from medicine, from science, from activism, from policy. All these people are working towards legal marijuana in America. Everyone needs your help. You need to work towards legal marijuana too. You can do it right now by visiting norml.org/relegalize or normalaudiostash.com. If you're a marijuana consumer in America, you can't do yourself a bigger favor than supporting NORML and helping us get marijuana legal in America. Support it today. Show your support today. Get active right now. Go to norml.org/relegalize or our website at normalaudiostash.com.
From Washington, D.C., the belly of the anti-marijuana beast. Season's greetings from NORML staff and the board of directors. To you and yours. This is Alan St. Pierre, Executive Director of NORML and the NORML Foundation. And I sincerely hope your holidays are both safe and hemp-filled.
Hi, this is NORML founder and legal counsel Keith Stropp, wishing you a happy holiday from NORML. Let's use this time with family and friends to rededicate ourselves to ending marijuana prohibition and stopping the arrest of responsible marijuana smokers. Happy holidays.
The podcasting technology of NORML is made possible by Red Aphid Interactive Media. More information at redapphid.com.